to do a few introductions because we're still waiting for people who've registered to drop in virtually. So I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Nick Chapman. I'm the Resilience Specialist at Willoughby City Council, and I'm going to be hosting the session today. I'd also like to introduce some of my colleagues who are going to be helping out. Ada Wong, who's the Resilience Coordinator at Lane Cove Council, giving us a wave. Ada's got a very good, important job. She's in charge of the tech. And her colleague, David Wilson, who's Lane Cove's Manager of Environmental Health. And this is probably one of the longest titles I've ever had to read out. David's also the Local Emergency Management Officer for the Lane Cove Willoughby Local Emergency Management Committee. So how about that? And then Aldrina Fernandez, who's the Resource and Resilience Officer from the City of Ryde. So as you're probably aware, the three councils, Ryde, Willoughby and Lane Cove, are jointly hosting this with the Red Cross. And so I'd also like to introduce from the Red Cross, Miriam McGregor, who's an Emergency Services Officer there. She's going to be helping facilitate the discussion groups that we're going to have in a minute. And also Erica Gregg, who's a volunteer coordinator, and Erica is going to be presenting in the second part of the session. So Ada, I think, how many have we got dropping in now? How are the numbers looking?
We got 22 people in total.
22, that's great. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country where this meeting is being held. We acknowledge the traditional inhabitants of the land on which we stand, the Aboriginal people, their spirits and ancestors. We acknowledge the vital contribution that Indigenous people and cultures have made and still make to the nation we share. So thank you everyone for registering for this session. We had over 50 registrations for today, which is great. We hope that by the end of this hour, you'll have a good grasp of the type of emergencies which people living in a metropolitan city like Sydney may be exposed to, and what we can all do to think and plan ahead for that emergency so that we can withstand the impacts on ourselves, our family and friends, and most importantly, bounce back quickly after the emergency has passed. As you probably noticed on your screen, we will be recording the session and uploading it onto the council websites so that other people can see it, particularly the ones who've registered for this session, but they haven't necessarily been able to join us online right now. So they'll be able to catch up with it later. But I should add that only the presenters' screens will be recorded, not the smaller breakout rooms that we'll be popping you into in a few minutes' time. So now I'm going to start screen sharing. So can everybody see that? Ada, can you see that? Yeah, good. So here's the agenda for the session today. I'll start by giving just a 5-minute talk about the extreme weather events that we're experiencing and will continue to experience due to the ongoing impacts of climate change. Then Ada is going to divide us into virtual breakout rooms, and we'll be inviting you to share your thoughts about what you might need to do when an emergency situation occurs. So the scenario we've chosen is an extreme heat event, which has caused a power outage for 24 hours in Sydney. Then we'll come back together again as a big group for a really interesting presentation from Erica from the Red Cross. She'll be introducing you to the Red Cross Get Prepared app and how you can go about preparing a Red Cross Ready plan, which you'll find out is a pretty straightforward thing to do. So throughout the session, you're welcome to ask any questions or make any comments that you might like to make by using the chat function at the bottom of your screen. But I do ask that when one of the presenters is speaking, if you could turn your mic off. The mute button is also at the bottom of your screen. But when we pop you into breakout rooms, if you have a camera on your computer and a mic, please put both the camera and the mic on so that you can see others in the group and we can all see each other. And if you haven't already done so, you might like to download over the next few minutes the Red Cross Get Prepared app. But if you don't do that during the session, don't worry. Everything we talk about will be recorded and posted up on the council website. So you can return to this session and the Red Cross app later. But just to get us going, Ada's now going to show a short 1-minute cartoon, which was produced by Willoughby City Council, where I work, for Emergency Ready Week from 20th to the 27th of September. So it was just last month. So I'll stop sharing now, Ada, and over to you.
Emergencies can put people at risk. We all need to be prepared for storms and floods, fires in buildings, as well as bushfires, extremely hot weather, health emergency and pandemic. Be prepared by making sure you know what the risks are. Download the Get Prepared app by the Australian Red Cross. Talk to your family and community, and in particular, check in on people who may be vulnerable, such as the elderly and people living with a disability. Prepare an emergency plan and visit the Resilient Willoughby website. Be prepared and stay safe.
This
Okay, so thanks for showing us that cartoon, Ada. And as you can see, it pretty much sums up what we're going to be going through during today's session. I'm assuming that people can see the PowerPoint again now. The screen sharing's okay? Great, thanks guys. So we've had a pretty challenging time in New South Wales in the last 18 months. It was only February last year, we were still in the grip of the worst drought experienced in Australia in over a century. And we were reeling from the terrible Black Summer bushfires, which destroyed 5 million hectares of bush in New South Wales alone, and had a terrible impact on wildlife, which is going to be felt for many years to come. I'm sure you'll remember, for those of you who were in Sydney at that time, the really disturbingly thick and at times quite acrid bushfire smoke that blanketed Sydney at various times between November 2019 and January 2020. And that meant that on some days we had the worst air quality in the world by a long shot. December 2019 was actually the hottest December ever recorded here in Australia. And things really tipped over on the 17th of December, when it hit 41 degrees right across the country. Then in late February last year, it all changed. And we had torrential rain, a 1 in 30-year rain event, in fact, which broke the drought in many parts of New South Wales, which is obviously a good thing, but is a bad thing because it caused major flooding and storm damage in places. You may recall we had another 1 in 30-year rain event just 6 months ago, which caused very disruptive flooding in various coastal parts of New South Wales. And on our TV screens every night for over a week, there were the horrible pictures of the lower Hawkesbury Basin flooded out. So that's 2 1 in 30-year rain events in 15 months. So I think the planet is telling us something. And then in March last year, the significance of those natural disasters was kind of swept away by the COVID-19 pandemic. And that has caused social and economic disruption on a global scale, and continues to cause problems 15 months later as we emerge from another extended lockdown here in New South Wales. So, as the Queen of England says from time to time, it's been an annus horribilis, a horrible year. And all the indicators suggest that the pandemic will continue for many months to severely disrupt life, both socially and economically. And the impacts of climate change will, of course, continue to intensify. So to be able to face up to all of this, we need to become ever more resilient. And that's a challenge for all of us, but particularly for people who, in some way or another, are vulnerable. And here's a couple of very recent reminders that extreme weather is here. So just a month ago, 3 tornadoes tore through the Bathurst area, causing significant damage to some properties. And then just a couple of weeks ago, some severe storms hit Sydney on the 14th of October, and giant hailstones the size of golf balls started to fall out of the sky. So these events can cause significant damage when we're least expecting it. So we owe it to ourselves and our families to be as well prepared as we can, which is what today's session is all about. Unfortunately, according to Australia's Bureau of Meteorology and other climate experts in Australia and overseas, the weather is going to get more extreme as we progress through the 21st century. So this is a snapshot of the Bureau of Meteorology's State of the Climate report from 2021. Average global temperatures will continue to rise by 2 degrees by 2050. And that's even if we do achieve a global agreement at the COP26 negotiations in Glasgow that are coming up next month, involving world leaders from many countries around the world, including Scott Morrison. And it's an uncomfortable fact that because Australia is where it's located on the globe, we are more vulnerable to global temperature increases than other parts of the world. So according to a report by the Australian Academy of Sciences, which was published in March this year, temperatures in Australia, average temperatures have already increased 1.4 degrees since 1910. So this means that the number of hot and very hot days is expected to double, more than double in the next 30 years. Sea level rises will continue. And as has been the case for the past 50 years, rainfall will decrease, particularly in spring and winter. And that is particularly the case along the eastern seaboard, which is a bit unfortunate because that's where most Australians live, you know, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne. So the bushfire season will increase in length and bushfires will become larger, more intense, and harder to control. So it's a bit depressing, but these extreme weather events, whether they're floods, drought, storms, high winds, or some combination, they're going to increase and they will probably happen more often. They may well be more intense and they may well last longer. So unfortunately, this means that as a community, we really need to get prepared for this worsening situation. So to get us thinking about what this means for us here in Sydney's Lower North Shore, we've developed a scenario for you to react to and to discuss in the small rooms that Ada's going to put us into in a minute. So this is the scenario we'd like you to think and talk about in your groups for about 10 minutes. It's early February and the Sydney region has just experienced 5 consecutive days with maximum temperatures of over 40 degrees. In the western suburbs, it's hit 44 degrees. There have been hundreds of heat-related admissions to hospital, and the morbidity rate, which is the number of people who die every day, is steadily increasing, particularly amongst the very frail, sick, and/or elderly. Public transport is affected. The trains are running slow because there's a risk that the rail lines will buckle and that there'll be a derailment. That's exactly what happened in Melbourne in 2009 when they had a sustained and very hot period. Outdoor events have been cancelled and some schools have sent their students home. Several bushfires are burning in national parks and urban bushland areas around Sydney. In fact, an emergency warning has been announced for Lane Cove National Park. And parts of the city are blanketed with acrid bushfire smoke, just like we experienced in Sydney in late 2019 during the Black Summer bushfires. It's 1 p.m. on a Thursday and it's hit 45 degrees. Demand's power reaches a crisis point and there's a sudden massive blackout right across the lower North Shore, which includes suburbs like Lane Cove, Ryde and Willoughby. So that's the scenario. Ada will put us into small virtual groups in the breakout rooms in a minute. That's going to be done randomly, so you don't have to choose a room. You just get a message which pops up on your screen and you just press join. Please unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you have one so that you can see other people in the group. And Ada will send a 1-minute reminder to us when we're ready to come back to the main virtual room. There'll be a council or Red Cross facilitator in each of the groups. And what we'd like you to do is introduce yourself by telling us what sort of home you live in. So do you live in an apartment, townhouse, detached home, near bushland or whatever? And then given the scenario, it's 45 degrees at 1 p.m. Power is out, most likely for the next 24 hours. Fortunately, internet and mobile services are still working for now. Train services are significantly disrupted. So in your groups, have a chat about what the impacts would be on you, your family, and your home. And secondly, what would you need to do about it? So that's all from me. And Ada, over to you.
I'm going to pause the recording now.
Okay, so we're all back and we've had an intense conversation in 8.5 minutes, but we're on time. So what I'd like to do actually is invite a couple of the council or Red Cross facilitators to just put your mic on and just give us a bit of a snapshot of some of the things that you talked about in your group. So David, maybe would you like to lead off?
Yep, by all means. Firstly, I apologise to Ricky. We didn't get to doing Ricky's assessment, but I'll make the assumption that as follows. Ricky and Arnold have both lived in units until recently, and Arnold has just moved into a house in Western Sydney, and Fiona lives in a house at Northbridge. So in relation to the response that Arnold's comments was that he felt that there may be some breeze, even though it was warm, about 41 degrees, and so would open his house up. He does have an aged relative, but part of his plan of attack would be to ensure that consuming water to remain hydrated and try and maximise breeze as much as possible. Fiona's at Northbridge and is near to a bush reserve that, and part of the reason for participating today was to try and develop an action plan, in particular in response to bushfires. Fiona's response was one of closing shutters, keeping the house cool, consuming water, and ensuring that the fire break that is just near as part of the bush reserve is watered down. Fiona has the benefit of a backyard pool. The thing is, so that would be of benefit. We were stumped as a group, I suppose, in relation to with the power being out. The thing is, because it does affect all aspects of urban living to a large extent, and including access to the internet eventually when you don't have the capacity to charge phone devices and that type of thing. But that's a summary of our group.
That's good, David. Thank you, and quite a lot of interesting kind of dimensions from your group. Erica, what about you?
Other than those, our group was pretty savvy. One thing was to bring your pets inside.
Yeah.
And encourage the family to come home from school, home from uni, so as they can keep safe. I think otherwise it was mostly the same.
Yeah, okay.
Keep hydrated, shut up the house, etc.
Yeah, there's bound to be some common threads coming through here, which is kind of partly why we wanted to have the discussion in the first place. Aldrina, how did you go with your group?
Erica and I were in the same group, so pretty similar.
Oh, right. Okay. Miriam, are you there?
Yep. Yeah, my group was pretty savvy too. Everybody was living in a house. So a big part of their strategy was shutting up the house and making sure you could keep it cool from the morning. So shutting the curtain, opening a skylight or a window to let a little bit of the hot air out. But yeah, they weren't too about keeping the house cool. In the two-story houses, there was the idea that maybe we could move anybody who sort of sleeps upstairs to sleep downstairs in the cooler part of the house. We spoke about making sure that we're listening to 702 to get emergency updates from that channel. And we also spoke about developing a fire plan and preparing pretty early if you were living on that level in sort of urban areas and the bush.
That sounds good. Everybody, could I just ask you to put your mics off, actually, except the people that are speaking, because sometimes we hear a bit of, sounds like we're in a fish tank or something. Look, I'll just conclude. Our group was a great group, pretty savvy. Most of us, well, I think it was 3 living in apartments, 2 living in detached dwellings. And one of our members is registered for life support during the night time. And so if the power goes out, that's a pretty important consideration for him. A couple of our group members had kids, and so they kind of assumed that the kids had probably been sent home. So how do we keep the kids occupied and cool? And at least one of the group had a pool at the basement of their apartment, which was a pretty obvious place to get to. Fortunately, on using steps, not the lift, because the lift obviously wouldn't work. And there was a general feeling, which was that we actually have had some practice by going through this pandemic, you know, of dealing with unusual situations which have impacted on the family and making those adjustments. And so we can probably collectively draw on the experience of the pandemic in terms of the sorts of extreme weather events that I was outlining in my talk. So that's the wrap up, I think. So thanks everyone for joining in the discussion. And I think, you know, we've talked about a very hot weather event and an extended power outage and what that might mean for our families. So now we're going to hear from Erica from the Red Cross about how we can plan better for this sort of emergency situation so that the impact on us and our families is less, because we're organised. We thought a bit about what we will need to do. We're well prepared, which means that we should be able to cope much better when the emergency situation occurs, and more importantly, bounce back quicker after the emergency has passed. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Erica from the Red Cross to trot us through her presentation about the app and the Ready plan. Erica, over to you.
Okay, so you can see my slide.
Yep.
Great. Great. Thank you, Nick, and welcome everyone. So pleased to be here with you today. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we're meeting on today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. We are all on different land today, and I'm on Wongal land along the Parramatta River. So today I'm going to be talking about being prepared for an emergency. We've been talking today about heat and electricity outage, which is quite possible this summer. That might be an emergency that we lock down in, but it could be one that we seek out a cool place where there is still air conditioning. But I will talk about both staying in, locked in, and also evacuating in an emergency, such as a fire. I'd just like to add to the heat wave scenario that heat waves are really serious. And while accurate figures aren't available, the estimated deaths from heat waves in Sydney in 2020 was close to 400. And that's predicted to rise in the coming decades, as Nick indicated. We know that councils have plans for emergencies and all levels of government have plans for emergencies. So it's time that we all made an individual plan for ourselves. And I'm hoping that today you might be motivated to do that. Red Cross have a preparedness plan that we call Ready Plan. And I'll tell you about that and about the use of the Red Cross app in relation to all emergencies. As I said, lock-ins and emergencies can be stressful, but if you are prepared, you are more likely to be less stressed and to cope better. So, okay. So a little bit about the app. The Red Cross Preparedness App looks like this. There's 4 steps for developing a Ready plan and using the app to do it. So they're get in the know, get connected, get organised and get packing. And I'll talk to those in a minute or two. So the app is simple to download and it prompts you to add information like contacts and meeting places. And that information is then stored then on your phone within the app. Once you've completed the basics of the app, you can unlock additional tasks and add more information. You can pick tasks that are relevant to you. So from, for example, identifying how you might react to stress to planning for your pets. Each task provides you with further information and links to relevant resources. You can place notes in the app. You can complete checklists, create reminders and mark items as complete when done. So this is what the basics are within that the app will ask you about. This is what it looks like inside the app. So it asks you to connect with three people. You can connect with more than that, but they might be people that you're going to reach out to if you're locked in or you're evacuated. So it could be the person whose home you would go to, that relative or friend that you would go to if you had to evacuate. But I'd like you to think about, when you do this, of finding someone within your group or friends that might be the person that can help you emotionally. When things get hard, that they'll listen, and someone that you can ring if you're in lockdown or you're concerned or worried. That person could also be a really important person to have after the emergency, because after the emergency, you may also need support. Someone nearby. So that would be a person that might be a neighbour, someone, you know, that can help you, perhaps in a lock-in, to drop off food or something you might need if you're staying in. And you might have found that person during COVID. And you might need that person during the rest of the COVID pandemic. Someone close by. I mean, they say in an emergency, it's going to be our neighbours that we connect with and that might help us most. Often we don't know our neighbours, so it can be a good idea to connect with them. And someone handy that can assist you perhaps with technology issues, something that they can talk you through over the phone. It might be someone that helps you to fix things after the event. So we'll move on now to get in the know, which is one of the first steps in the Ready Plan. So take time to educate yourself on hazards. You're doing that today. We've talked about the hazards that might affect in Sydney. But, you know, last year we didn't have pandemic on the agenda. Who would have thought? How many of us were prepared? So, you know, thinking about all the things and educating yourself about them. You can learn about these things from well-trusted websites like SES, Fire and Rescue, your council website, Resilience New South Wales. Obviously, for health issues in the pandemic, we've got used to using the New South Wales Health website. Know your emergency radio station is Sydney 702. That's an AM station. And they will announce updates on every emergency, approximately every 20 minutes during the day. And even in heat wave, they'll go ding, 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 interrupting. Heat wave's really bad, give you an update on the temperature and what's predicted by the Bureau of Meteorology. In your unit block, know your exits. For example, if you've got a lift in your unit block, if you have to walk down the stairs because there's no electricity, know what that would be like. Perhaps practice it with your family. Walk down those stairs. Then you can report anything missing in the stairs, or if there's rubbish or other things in the stairs, you can report that to building maintenance. Talk to your family about what it'll be like, whether you're in a home or a unit block. Talk about emergencies and make a plan with your family or those that you live with. Know about websites or apps to use during an emergency, like the SES for storms or Fires Near Me for bushfires. You can get a lot of information if you're able to. Also, things like transport outages and blocked roads, whether or not, if you're leaving in an emergency, whether or not you can get through due to any road closures. That's all available on various apps. But put important numbers in your plan or in your Red Cross app. So moving on to get connected. Getting connected is about knowing your community and being connected in your community. Obviously, you'll be connected with those people that you've put in your app, those 3 people you've recognised. But, you know, think about also connecting with groups and neighbourhood centres and perhaps council events. So as you meet other people in your community and meet your neighbours. You know, one of the first things that happens usually if your electricity goes out is you look outside your house or walk outside your house or look outside your front door and see if that's happening to everyone else in the street. And in doing that, you may start talking to your neighbours. You may have already done that and you may know them. So, you know, knowing that in an emergency they're there, that can be great. Strong communities help each other before, during, and after an event. So your neighbours could be essential to you after the event to share what you've experienced. Being connected is really important. So now we're moving on to getting organised. So in getting organised is, again, what you do before an event. Think about your important documents, your passport, your visa, birth certificates, all those important documents, including your driver's licence. Good idea to take a scan of them, store it somewhere safe, on a USB perhaps, or on a portable hard drive. If you lose everything, particularly in a bushfire, and some of you seem to perhaps be near the bush, It's really hard to get back those documents. So also scanning important things that are important to you, like photographs. So as you've got them stored, if you lose them all, then you can reproduce them if you've got copies stored in a digital format. Making a plan to reduce financial stress, for example, making sure your insurance is up to date and that you're covered for the things like fire and flood. Have all your medical documentation up to date. Make sure your Medicare card's in your wallet. Know your pharmacy and your GP number, especially, and have that in your plan, especially if you rely on medication. Plan for your pets. Each pet should have its own plan, and make sure you have medications, food, toys, anything that it needs ready to go. Know your plan. Where will you go? What will you take? Write it down. Have it in your phone, on your app. Have it on a hard drive. You decide what is best for you. Some people need to write things down rather than have apps, but the app can prompt you for what you might write down. So getting packing now is the fourth step in the Ready plan. So pack a go bag for yourself. That go bag will have in it what you need for yourself, personal to you. I'm not going to go through what you can put in a go bag. You can find that information out on the Red Cross website or on the SES website or on the Fire and Rescue website. There's lots of ideas. But for me, I might want to put in my toothbrush and my own toothpaste, and I might want to put in a change of undies. That's me. There'd be a lot of other things in there as well. But if you have to stay out overnight or for 24 hours, they could be the things that are important to you. Make a kit and a go bag for your pet, and also make a kit and a go bag for each child in your family. Get them involved in doing that. Talk to them, get their ideas about what should be in their kit. You can also pack a larger box, but it depends where you live and whether or not you might be able to get that out of the house in the time involved. But it can be a good idea if you have to evacuate to already have some things in a box, or a list. I suggest a list on your go bag of the things you need to pick up as you leave, because it can be very stressful as you leave to evacuate, particularly if it's fast. So, having a list of the things that you might add, and I'll go through that in a minute of what they might be. So part of getting packing is to prepare to evacuate or leave. So some of the things that might be on that list that you have to put in at the last minute would be your phone charger, things like medication, your wallet, your glasses, perhaps those precious things like your jewelry, those things that you can pick up quite quickly. Something warm. Even in summer, it can get cold overnight. Masks and sanitizer for our COVID time. Snacks, a torch, battery run. A small first aid kit. What you put in your evacuation kit to leave will be different to all of us. Everyone has their own special things that they would add. And as I said before, you can get those lists from the various websites. What I'd like to say is, if you're organised and you have a go bag packed, that preparation might help relieve your stress. A lot of people have told me over the years that, they ran around in the house like a chook with its head cut off, picking up things that afterwards they didn't really need, and forgot the things that they really needed, and are really upset with themselves for that. There'll be enough upset and enough stress without you having to leave behind something that is really important to you. So having that on your list is really important. So getting packing for staying in. So if you have to lock down or stay in because of the pandemic or because of heat, ensure you have enough food to get by for a few days. Now, if the electricity is out, the food in your refrigerator will go off. So having staples in your cupboard can be a good idea. And to buy those things gradually and have them is a good idea. Maybe you've got camping equipment and you can cook, but if you haven't got gas and you haven't got camping equipment, you may not be able to cook. Also, I'd like to say there in terms of food, as well as those staples, have some comfort food or some food that might keep you happy, particularly if you've got children. Even you yourself, maybe you're a chocolate freak or a cheese freak or a crisps freak, whatever it is, have some of those in the cupboard as well. Don't just leave it to the basics. Remember everyone in your household, including the babies, the children, the pets. And if it's a heat wave, plenty of cold water and ice blocks. Ice blocks, if the fridge goes off, you can eat the ice blocks still. They'll keep for a little while. But it's really important during staying in for heat wave to eat cold things because it will help keep you cool. Staying in, keeping over some of those Netflix or Binge or Stan or whatever you subscribe to during COVID, keeping them on in case there is a heat wave and you do have electricity, but also some books or board games or activities for the children. Things like a fan for personal use, like a small personal fan that's battery run, or a radio that runs on batteries so you can tune into 702, a torch, and spare batteries. Spare batteries is a really good idea. And also it's important to think about replacing things in your kit, like batteries. And I'd just like to suggest that on the October long weekend, when we go on to, we put our clocks adjust for daylight saving, also check your smoke alarms, which is what the fire and rescue will tell you to do, but also your go bag and your evacuation kits, and replace those batteries and replace any food in them so as you keep them fresh and up to date. So just back to heat wave, I think we've covered today most of the things to do in a heat wave. Stay indoors in the middle of the day when it's the hottest, minimize your physical activity, avoid alcohol, take those cool showers or baths, keep the curtains shut, or if you're in a particular hot place and there is a place you can go that might be air conditioned because it has that capacity, perhaps go out in the middle of the day. So the next is prepare your mind. How Red Cross's plan is different to the other plans, the other plans that other organisations have, is we ask you to prepare your mind. Anticipate that it's going to be stressful. Identify your feelings and thoughts, how you cope with stress. Manage by being calm, doing some breathing and self-talk. So when you get that knock on the door from SES or the police or whoever it is that asks you to evacuate, take a few deep breaths because the stress is just going to come on you. And don't run around like a chook with its head cut off. Go straight to your list and look at what you have to pick up. And say to the person knocking on your door, I just need to pick up my go bag and my wallet or my handbag or whatever it is you need to pick up. And take some deep breaths and say to yourself, I can do that. So I need to move on a little more quickly now because we're running short of time. So the app puts everything you need in one place. I think it's a really good idea to have a look at it. Even if it's not right for you, you can prepare yourself a paper version. I think it's also important that you share your plan. The app will prompt you to share your plan, particularly with the people that are in your plan, those 3 people or those friends or relatives and to share your meeting points with your family. I know when my sons were in high school, I talked to them about how to walk home from the city to my place. So as if there was an emergency, they had in their head that they could walk home. And so that's a really good thing to practice perhaps with children. Remember, it's great to have everything down digitally, but also think about having them on other devices so as you've got a backup. Now, what I want to assure you is that with the app, if the electricity's out and the phones are out, you will still have the app on your phone with all the information on it about what your plan was. So even though you can't make calls or you can't get on the internet, if your phone is charged, you'll be able to remind yourself of what you might need to do or what you might need to take. Just want to also add that during the summer holidays, if you get caught in a bushfire area or a flood area, you could still use your plan while you're on holidays. I'd like to thank you today, and I hope that you found this useful. We've run out of time now, so I'm going to hand over to Nick straight away. Thank you for joining us today. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Erica, for a really interesting and valuable presentation about how to prepare ourselves better for emergencies. We are pretty much out of time, people. We're due to finish in 3 minutes. So I'm going to wrap up. But if any of you have particular questions that you'd like to ask Erica or myself or anybody else from the team, you're welcome to stay back for 10 minutes after we've kind of finished the formal part of the meeting, and we can respond to your questions. I hope you found this session useful. If you haven't already done so, I encourage you to download the Red Cross Get Prepared app and fill it in as best you can. And by the end, with luck, you should have your very own ready plan. As Erica mentioned, there are plenty of links and resources if you are interested in finding more out about planning for particular emergencies. You know, for example, if you're in a bushfire-prone area, then New South Wales Fire and Rescue and the Rural Fire Service have some great information. But we're all of us kind of buried in information. So what we've got up on the screen for you now is the links to the 3 councils, and council websites are very useful kind of repositories for all sorts of information. Those links will take you to the kind of the Get Prepared section of our websites, and then you can follow the links and read up on the information there. And then, of course, at the top of that slide, you've got the link to the Australian Red Cross Get Prepared part of their website. So we'd really appreciate it if you could take 5 minutes to fill out our feedback survey that Aldrina has just posted up in the chat. Feedback from attendees like yourselves is really helpful for us council people and the Red Cross when we're planning future online or face-to-face sessions like this. And if you have found it an interesting and worthwhile session, we do actually have another one coming up next Wednesday in the evening, 6 till 7 p.m. It'll be exactly the same as the format that we've had today. So you might want to let your family or friends know, and they may be interested in joining us for that session. Registrations are still open for that. So that's pretty much it from us. I'd like to thank Red Cross, particularly Erica for her presentation and Miriam for facilitating the group discussion. And also thank you to the council facilitators, Ada for running the tech, Aldrina and David for helping out with the breakout rooms. And a big thank you for all of you who have joined us today for taking part in the breakout room discussions, which I think could have carried on for quite a few more minutes. I hope you've enjoyed it. And those of you who don't have any questions, please feel free to log off now and have a good day. Thank you. And for those who are